Hello everyone. I'm excited to be hosting the 13th session of our webinar series, Masters of Conversion, where you get to learn from the masterminds of winning website experiences. Like always, I'm your host Vipul, and I'm the marketing manager at VWO, a full funnel experience optimization platform. So today, to share some wisdom on experimentation with you guys, we have Narayan Keshavan, and Narayan is the head of analytics for the design analytics function for the business giant Dell. I'm really glad to have you here, Narayan. If you could just
Yeah, thank
switch on your
you, Vipul.
camera and let the audience look at you, that'll be great.
Yeah, happy to be here, Vipul.
Great to
I'm
see you,
busy.
Narayan.
Thank you.
Perfect. So, yep. So before I pass on this mic to Narayan, and I just wanted to inform all of you, and it's a bit of housekeeping stuff. So we'll be taking up all your questions in the end, and I'm sure you're going to have tons of them. So do send in your questions whenever you have one using the questions panel, and we'll take them up in the end. So yeah, with that, Narayan, the stage is all yours.
Vipul, is my presentation visible?
Yes, your presentation is visible, and the
Oh,
audio is coming across well as well.
okay, thank you. So, hello everyone. I'm pretty happy to be here at this Masters of Conversion webinar. As Vipul said, I won't take too much time talking about myself, but just a quick overview. I lead the digital analytics function in a global team called Design Analytics, and this team is a part of the design org at Dell. And we own the experimentation charter for Dell.com globally. So it's across globe, and it's a 50 plus member team. Personally, I have been, in the industry for 13 years. I've worked in telecom, e-commerce, as well as insurance, and I've been in a marketing role where I had P&L responsibilities in the telecom sector, and I have been managing digital marketing analytics or digital analytics teams, in various roles, covering some of the things that are already called out there. And just an additional piece of information, I also happen to lead a community building exercise called Digital Analytics Community, and this is something where we try to facilitate meetups, every quarter within Bangalore. So that's a very quick background. Let me just jump into the content. I'll take a pause on this slide, and if you all could probably type into the questions panel, what came to your mind when you saw this? Just a few responses. Yeah.
Right. So guys, you can actually type in your responses using the questions panel, and Narayan will be looking at them.
Okay. So I think I have seen a few responses, and I think I'm expecting to see most of you respond with Google. And there's a reason I have put this specifically. And what you're seeing on your screen right now is one of the 10 principles or philosophies for Google as a company. So you can, go and check where you can just Google, Google's philosophy or 10 tenets or 10 principles, and you could see this as the first one, which I feel is relevant to every single individual who works in the area of optimizing the user experience. Things are fairly straightforward. You focus on the user, and rest of it will be taken care of. So that's the brief message that I wanted to start with. Just a moment about how it is at Dell. As I said, we work on the experimentation charter for Dell.com, and I've just given some glimpses of how this website has evolved from 1996 to date. A lot of it is backed by experimentation, and I've been closely working with this team for close to 6.5, 7 years, and I've seen how this team now plays a very big role, especially in cases of major launches, even including complex website overhauls or redesigns. I think a lot of it is being driven by experimentation, and I'll briefly talk about some of those things through the course of the presentation. So very fortunate to be at an organization where experimentation is taken very seriously. I've not personally received an email, but I've heard that there are occasions when Michael Dell himself tries to understand what's going on in terms of the tests that are running on Dell.com. So yeah, now let me talk about how to get started, or how is it that you probably look at experimentation. And what I've highlighted here is the entire spectrum, right, from quantitative on one side to qualitative on the other side. And this indicates, where can your ideas or hypothesis, or any suggestions can come from. So you can see, we as a team obviously do a lot of ideation analysis, trying to figure out, where are the opportunities to make our website even better? How do we drive conversion rate higher? How do we improve the revenue? Trying to understand the user journey, the major friction points in their journey, things like those. That's something that we do. The other big source of ideas or hypothesis is the tests that we run. And every single test that we run gives us something that we learn and take back. So those again become a source of new idea for us. And obviously, like most organizations, we do have tools like Clicktail, now Content Square, and Glassbox is getting integrated now. So we do look at heat maps, session replays, trying to understand, what is it that users go through when they are on the website. One of the most important factors is also the business stakeholders, the actual e-commerce teams, marketing teams, P&L teams. They do have a good understanding of the pulse of users, and they often come with some great ideas themselves. So we make sure that we keep take into account those ideas as well. And again, we have a lot of verbatim that gets registered. Most often, as with most organizations, the verbatim is probably more on the not so pleasant side. But again, the reality is the more we hear from users, the better we understand what is it that can make their experience better. So this is what we should keep an eye out for. As an organization that is focused on experimentation, the first and the most important thing that we should keep in mind is that we don't forget or don't ignore or overlook any critical area where you can actually get a very meaningful and interesting insight or a test hypothesis. So, on a piece of paper, we need to write down what are my avenues to get those ideas, and make sure, maybe in the beginning you don't have that bigger team. You don't probably have, the leadership giving you the blessings or, the funding to really run an elaborate program. But nonetheless, at all points in time, you should have a good sense of, where are the sources for me to get those ideas? Because unless you have a good number of ideas, you won't really probably make progress in terms of getting the good ones or prioritizing the better ones. So this is the very first step and most important, and especially for organizations which don't really have huge teams. Again, in our case, we are a 50 plus member team that works on this global charter. Now, in case an organization has a very small team, probably one or two individuals working on it, I think the most easiest way to come up with ideas is, look at the pages with the highest bounce rates, pages with the highest exit rates, but significant amount of traffic. That's in first glance, that will give you the real problem pages on your website. The other sure shot opportunity to get some meaningful insights is talking to business stakeholders themselves. They often have a very good understanding of what is it that really is coming in the way of users going ahead and completing a purchase on the website. So for organizations that are not big, I think you should start small, start with some of these very obvious things, and as and when you prove the worth of your experimentation program or the entire exercise, then possibly expand to this entire spectrum of idea sources. So this slide, and I'll get into, I know this is, I'll keep it, to a limited extent in terms of all the theoretical aspects, and I'll talk about specific tests when we move forward. But this is a simple, layout or a simple visualization of what our experimentation roadmap is based on. So right in the middle, you can see that, I've mentioned most of the sources of ideas, UX research, analytics, voice of users, insights from past tests, product managers, whatever, they get as insights, benchmarking with other websites, inputs from the business. All these are the sources. And as I said, you need to have all these collected or gathered in one place. And then you have to figure out, how do I move forward now? Obviously not everyone has the resources, not the amount of time and resources to execute millions of tests at all points in time. So obviously the most important thing is to prioritize. How do you prioritize? and that's what we do in the manner that is shown here on the slide. So on one hand, you see, the key stakeholders that we work with, the product managers, the design team, which happens to be our parent organization as well. So we are a part of the design team. Then the marketing and the e-commerce teams. So we make sure that we have those touch points, regular connects, and clear point of communication with these stakeholders. And whatever we have as our ideas, we make sure that while prioritizing or filtering out something that we cannot do, we keep in mind what their priorities are, what their goals or objectives for the financial year look like, what is it that they are more focused on. We need to do it in consultation with them. So that's very critical, and we don't really do it in isolation and just go and run some random tests or experiments. So we make sure that these stakeholder priorities or the business priorities are taken into account. Now, two is how do we try to figure out? We've done that. Probably we still have a whole lot of tests which we need to run, and we still can't figure out what to do next. So the other thing is trying to see what is the impact potential of an idea. I was talking about the other piece in terms of how do you prioritize. So that's where it's important to take into account what type of test are you running. Are you influencing an element or a feature on the page that really matters to a lot of users? Here, I think some knowledge of how people engage with your website, how they engage with different elements on the key pages of your website, that knowledge is required. But it's important to take into account, what is it that I'm going to influence or change or modify based on the test hypothesis. To give a simple example, if I know that people come to the website and I have probably, a big banner on one of the pages, which I know barely anyone clicks on. Probably just half a percentage of all the visits that end up on that page result in some sort of engagement with the banner. I know that out of 1,000 people, maybe 5 are clicking on it. So unless I'm really changing something significantly, I know that even if I make the banner the most perfect one, or really modify it and make it better, what is the best case scenario? Probably that 5 clicks could go up to 25 clicks, which is a huge 500% increase. But the reality is it's still insignificant in the larger scheme of things. So may not be the perfect example, but what I'm trying to imply is that we have to take into account that what is the element that we are trying to influence, what is it that we are trying to change, and if there's any information already available that a significant number of users, or it's an element that is highly engaged with, then that any sort of improvement in this can give you a significant uplift. And this is purely organization specific. Everyone will figure out as they move forward. There's no fixed or exact way of doing it. And the other is doing some sort of simple projections in terms of what do you think would be the upside based on the change. It could be based on some of the past test results that you have seen for similar pages or similar elements. It could be based on some simple projection saying this is the most pessimistic, this is the optimistic projection. So you could do that, and there's no fixed way of doing it. But at the end of the day, once you have balanced these two things, the priorities of stakeholders and the potential impact that some of these test ideas can bring about, then you are in a very good place. And then probably you have a list of prioritized hypotheses that you can take forward as your experimentation roadmap. So again, this is probably most common. Most organizations do it this way, but just a passing reference to this. Again, we get a hypothesis, we make sure that we are focused on the success metric, and success metric should clearly flow from the hypothesis. So for example, if I am trying to increase my upsell, I'm trying to sell, I'm selling a laptop, and I'm trying to make sure that people also buy a mouse, they probably add some services, they go for some additional things that we are offering along with the product. I should be then focused on whether my attach rate has gone up, whether my average order value has gone up. I can't say that this will make sure that more people end up buying. So I need to have that clarity in terms of what is the change that I'm making. Is it going to impact a particular metric or some other metric? So I need to have the success metric clearly flowing from the hypothesis. Obviously, as with most organizations, we keep a close tab on how the tests are faring. Anything that is doing very badly or is causing any sort of is hurting the business in any way, we stop those tests immediately, because it's a multi-billion-dollar business. We can't let the business bleed because of something that we overlook. And again, assuming everything goes well, the test is either flat, or probably gives a great lift. We then get into a deep dive analysis trying to figure out, is it exactly in line with what our hypothesis was? And that's important. That's probably something that we do a little differently, and probably some would say we overdo it. But I feel that really generates a lot of insights for us. We spend a lot of time. We look at multiple things and make sure that what we see is it exactly in line with our hypothesis. And one of my examples will touch upon that. And if we are not convinced, even if we have a good result, we probably go for another iteration, or probably don't stop there. So again, this analysis that we do may give us another hypothesis, or probably, if we have a winner, obviously we may go ahead and implement it. So with all other sources, analysis remains a critical source, and this iterative process remains a critical source for figuring out what we need to do better. So that's very quickly on what we do at Dell, not very different from others. What I'll talk about now is some specific principles which may sound very straightforward, and with almost 8 to 9 years of being in this area, I feel these are still overlooked and sound very straightforward, very simple, but people get so lost in the specifics of the process that they forget these things. So let me start with the first one. I think I'll take a pause. How many agree that having more white space, having an uncluttered layout, especially on mobile devices, is a good idea, and definitely should be done? Just a yes, no. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I'm just repeating the question. How many think that having more white space, a clean layout, uncluttered layout is better for the business or for users? So yes, I think a vast majority are saying yes, and they agree, and that's what we believe as well. And what you're seeing here is, two variations of something that we did in Canada, and I'm specifically bringing out geographies also because we've seen many times that what holds true for one geography doesn't really hold true for another one. So whenever you're running a global experimentation program, you have to take into account those differences or those nuances in terms of consumer behavior, and make sure that you take an informed decision. You shouldn't probably implement something that is great for one country and probably doesn't resonate well with 8 other countries. So again, coming back to the example, in Canada, our hypothesis was, we have a fairly busy cart page, and if you see on your left, there's something at the top, there's a small banner at the top, and then there's the progress bar which tells you where you are in terms of cart and checkout. Then there's a type of encouragement or a messaging that says, if you use express checkout, these are the benefits, so why don't you do that? And then you get those call to actions. What we did in this test, which is what is seen on your right, is we removed a lot of that, and we said, let us keep it simple, let us keep only the relevant things. So we just start with the call to action buttons, and then it talks about the payment options that are offered by Dell, and you see the product image, you see the price. So what we felt is, this is more meaningful. People are obviously seeing what they need to see and should give us an upside. That brings me to the first principle. No matter how much ever experienced someone is, no matter how much ever time we have spent in this field, I can't say that with utmost certainty I'll always know what will happen when we run a test. Yes, you may have a fair sense, and more likely it will be similar to what you are thinking, but there will be a significant number of occasions when you'll really be surprised by the results. And the first principle is, you have to remember that nothing is obvious. The moment you start with an assumption that I know white space is good, so this has to be a winner, what changes is then you try to justify that, and you probably you're so focused on proving that you lose the real insights that you get. So I can't share the numbers with you. I can just give an indication of what worked, and I'll talk through what exactly happened in these tests in terms of user behavior. We reduced the clutter, so there were certain unintended consequences of that. So if you again compare the two images, you see that you have the product now appearing. You have the edit option next to the product. I don't know if it's that visible, but there's a small link which can allow you to edit either the quantity or it can also allow you to remove the product. It can also allow you to go back to the product details page. Those links came into prominence, and pretty much in your area of scanning when it comes to mobile devices, what we saw is while we made this change, a significant number of users started going backwards. They started using edit, they started using remove, and they started trying to, for whatever reason, they started having second thoughts in terms of moving forward. Earlier, although the design was cluttered, they didn't have that, and probably, maybe there was no avenue for them to have second thoughts and they were moving forward. I'm not saying that is great, but with this change, we realized that, people are now fiddling a bit and trying to, change something, trying to have second thoughts. So obviously, this was not a winning idea. Obviously, that doesn't mean that what we started off earlier and most of you agreed with, that white space is good and we should have more cleaner layouts. That still holds true. But the reality is, just saying white space is good and a cleaner layout is good doesn't help. We need to figure out how to execute that. And we probably didn't get the execution right. So this is something that we continued doing. But again, the big lesson learned is I can't be very sure even before running the test that, I know for sure that, this will work well. So that's just one example that really drives home the point. This I won't quote. It's like almost, every individual would know. And this is quoted like millions of times. But why I've quoted it here is like, this is so very true for any experimentation program as well. So this is the version that I go with. There's no such thing as a failed experiment or a bad A/B test. And I think I have also attended past PWO webinars. I've seen other speakers talk about it. They've even talked about how to leverage some of the poor results and go forward from there. So I think it's very important to keep this principle in mind, that you're not trying to say this is a winner, this is a loser. There's a test. The intention is obviously to start with a hypothesis and to validate whether that hypothesis works. If it doesn't work, it's great because it gives you some more insights, and probably you know even better what you should be doing next. So I'll give a quick example on this. This is from our India e-commerce site, and this one is on the shipping page. So again, best practices, everything that we read, know about, say that, please reduce the cognitive load for users, especially in checkout. Don't try to, give them too many fields to fill. Don't overwhelm them with, a request for a lot of data, a lot of irrelevant data that probably is not even required. So again, we just, went by that principle. So there were certain fields that required users to give their, company name, the GST information. All these are optional fields. So, those are the two that are highlighted with those yellow arcs. Those fields are not mandatory, and you can see that red asterisk is not present against these fields. So we said, and there was some element of legal obligation. The legal team wanted this to be there, and we couldn't remove it entirely. So what we tried to do is, can we make it the page a little less overwhelming? We have to retain it. We'll not remove it, but we'll collapse it. So that's what we did. Again, if you look at where those yellow arcs are pointing to, we just collapsed those sections. The intent was to make the form look a little less overwhelming, little more easier to fill with limited number of fields. And we were hoping that, this would ensure that more people having a bad experience on the shipping page would now move forward and go ahead and complete the purchase. So we were expecting some improvement in our conversion rate. So when we analyzed this, we saw that yes, it made life simpler for people on the shipping page, but eventually people moved to payment page, and a lot of people started either coming backwards or started dropping off from the payment page. A lot of people, after payment, we have something called as a review page where you can just, again look at everything once and then submit to place an order. So many people went even beyond payment, went to the review page, and then they did move forward. So it was interesting. We did achieve, a partial objective of pushing more people or encouraging more people to move forward from shipping to payment. But beyond that, they were not very interested in moving. And when we again, analyzed what happened, we realized that more than 22% of the users who place orders, they avail GST. And you know, I mean, of those of you who are familiar, you know, if you have a GST ID, there's a GST credit for small businesses and certain individuals. So you get some benefit when you give your GST details. Now, what was happening is we made it a little difficult to spot on the page. Quite likely that a significant number of people missed this detail, went forward hoping that maybe on the payment page some tax related or GST related information will be asked, didn't find it. We saw that, you know, again on the review page, people didn't find it. They said, okay, I'm not going ahead and placing an order. So we realized that this 22% of the orders, that was the segment that really hit us hard. So we saw more people move forward, but we didn't see an increase in conversion rate. So again, it was a so-called failed experiment or a failed test, but the reality is we did learn something. And what we did next is we did another iteration, very straightforward, didn't complicate things too much. We kept these fields expanded, not collapsed, but we just moved them after all the mandatory fields. So the idea was, again, you know, it's probably the middle path. You know, we still have a big page, but at least with asterisk, probably many people realize that, you know, there were fields which are mandatory and there are fields that they can skip if they want to. But at the same time, for people who were really interested in getting GST credit and wanted to get that information filled, we made sure that, you know, they did not miss out on this. So when we did this, again, we didn't get a conversion lift with confidence, statistical confidence, but we did see a better funnel performance. So it was a partial winner. So again, the point here is, you know, we keep iterating, we keep doing things. Sometimes they look very simple and silly, but there is a lot of interesting insights that we get even with tests that don't do well. With that, I come to this thing that I call as testing myopia. And in my career in this area, I have come across this many times. And I'll talk about what I call as testing myopia. I call it myopia because it's short-sightedness in terms of how you are interpreting the results. And I talked about it earlier as well. I said that, you know, when you run a test, you have to be very clear about your hypothesis. You have to be very clear about what the success metric is going to be. And unless you do that properly, there's a good amount of you know, room for doing something that is probably not good for your business. So here I don't give you a real example. I'm just taking a very hypothetical scenario. Let us say on a particular page, a product page, I run an experiment where, you know, there is a top navigation or a masthead, there is a banner, there's some text next to it, and I'm changing this banner. So variation A has a different banner altogether, pretty much leading to the same product page. Variation B has a different banner leading to the same product page, but the copy and the image, everything is different. So I'm just trying to see the efficacy of the banner, and I run this as a test. I have not thought about my hypothesis clearly. I'm saying this will help me improve my business. And so obviously I've not thought about my success metric yet. Now I come to this stage. I'm just giving partial data for this. Again, a very, very quick check. I know it keeps elongating my presentation, but quick check. How many, based on this data, would say that variation B is better? So the question is B better? Is it yes or B? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Good. I have a mix. I am seeing good responses. I mean, some are strongly agreeing that B is better, and some are saying, yeah, I mean, we have to define it clearly. It's probably not very clear what are we looking for. So I agree. What happens many times when we run tests, especially, you know, in cases when certain individuals are like, you know, very convinced about, again, as I said earlier, you know, very clear that this will bring about a positive change. They'll look at this, they'll say, you know what? People who engaged with the banner or clicked on the banner and used it to navigate, they are giving me a better conversion rate. It has gone up from 10% to 12% or 20% lift, and we should go ahead and implement it. So yes, I mean, that's one way of looking at it. What if I now give one additional piece of information? So this is again only the users of the banner. I'm not talking, so I'm talking about 1,000 visits that come to that page. 200 users click the banner in A, 100 users click the banner in B. The conversion rate for users in A is 10%, the conversion rate for users in B is 12%. And if I look at how many orders they are placing, it's 20 for A and 12 for B. Now, there are questions, right? I mean, people who were using the banner earlier, they were giving me 20 orders. Now I am getting 12 orders from a similar segment of users who are engaging with the banner and moving to the product page. Is that really good now? Then the question, I mean, at least, I mean, some people are still convinced even at this stage, and I'm not like, going to talk about anyone specific, but or any specific team, but yeah, there have been instances when even when you reveal this piece of information, people are still convinced. I don't care. They say, I am focused. What did I change? I changed the banner. I am interested in what happened for banner users. And they say that conversion improved. I don't care what happened for the rest of the website. And this is the complete picture for this hypothetical example. So if you see, banner users are a small segment compared to 1,000 visits, of which 200 visits users are clicking on the banner in A, and 800 are not clicking on it. So I cannot ignore these 800. So if you see what exactly is happening in B is not 200 people are clicking on it, only 100 are clicking on it, and 900 are now not clicking on it, which means compared to A and B, now 100 users probably who would have, with your current banner would have navigated to a product page. For whatever reason, they are now not comfortable navigating using the banner. You have brought some sort of friction or some sort of challenge for them. They'll obviously look to, now these 100 people may either use the top navigation or the masthead, or probably scroll on the page, click on some link, probably do a search on the page, do something on the page. So again, there's a question about who is a user. User is people who come to the website. It's visitor, basically any visitor who comes to the website. And I'm now specifically talking about visitors who come to a specific page. Here you see that overall orders that I get for the traffic that comes to this page is 36 in A, 30 in B. That means while yes, people who engage with the banner, they have a very good conversion rate, 10%. That has gone up to 12%. People who are not using the banner, they have pretty much similar conversion rate, 2%. But the size of these segments do matter. My engagement with the banner has gone down by 50%. And instead of 200 users, engaging with it, 100 are engaging. If I miss this larger picture, so what is happening at the end of the day, Dell as a company is getting 36 orders because of that element, either users, non-users, whatever. Overall, they are getting 36 orders. And in B, for whatever reason, it has gone down to 30. How can I go ahead and implement this? Which means tomorrow, instead of 36 orders, I'll be getting 30 orders every single day if this continues. So again, testing myopia for me is when you are so focused on a specific segment that you forget that when you make a change on the page, it is impacting others as well. Who do I define as my segment? Here, people who are clicking on the banner and navigating is my segment. But can I ignore people who wanted to click on the banner or would have clicked on the banner, but for whatever reason now are dissuaded from doing so? They go into my non-users. Does it mean that the change that I have made has not influenced them? It has still made an influence. It has still affected people. Unless we look at the larger picture, it is going to be a risky proposition. You might end up implementing things on your website which is actually bad for your business in the long run. And I think many times it happens, especially this argument. The test was about the banner. I am just worried about the banner segment. But please realize the size of the banner segment is also getting influenced because of the change. You are discouraging people from engaging. So missing the wood for the trees is what is happening when I say testing myopia. So it's very important to keep in mind, what am I trying to achieve? Clearly call it out and not be myopic and not be too focused on, what I want to do. So yeah, the real story is, yes, there's something right about banner B, the conversion rate is better, but there's something wrong as well because not as many people are clicking on it. So you have to take that holistic learning and, figure out what your next steps are. So I'll probably go a little faster. So the other thing is one often ignored area is what users are saying. I mean, many times people out of frustration, out of anger, disappointment, whatever you call it, leave behind a lot of text on your website. And it really is rewarding when you make sure either as a team member you keep looking at it periodically, or if you have a dedicated team to look at it periodically. It's very important to keep your ears very close to what they are saying. And I'll give you one example where it was such a simple thing that we learned from what users were saying and ended up being a very big winner, or a very big lift causing idea. So this is something that is very old, almost 5 to 6 years old. So around that time, this is again our cart page, and this is US. In US, on the cart page, we did not have, what you're seeing right now at the bottom, the Visa, MasterCard, American Express, Discover, all these payment methods. So they were not there. And it was just white space there. And when we were doing an analysis and we looked at, what are the feedback or verbatim that people are leaving behind on the checkout pages or pertaining to checkout pages, there was this comment that was, seen on a few occasions where people said, it would have been great if I had known what all payment options you accept. And, I would have not spent so much time and gone away without buying. Something on these lines. So our hypothesis for this test was people want to know what payment options we are giving. When should we show it is the other question. So our point of view was cart is the page where people give some sort of indication that they are interested in a product, and possibly they want to go ahead and buy. So we thought, let us show it on the cart page. And this is what our hypothesis was. We listed down what our expected user behavior was. We said we'll show the payment options on the cart page. What will happen now? Someone who wanted to use a payment option that is not listed there will get frustrated, will leave. So as a result, I'll see my exit rate go up on the cart page. Bad thing. But at the same time, my hypothesis also says that people who reach payment page now are better informed. They already know what they will encounter as payment options, and are prepared to pay. So we'll have fewer people dropping off from the payment page. Now, is it good enough to offset this exit rate that is going up on the cart page or not is another question. The other supporting argument, or the expected behavior that we had based on our hypothesis is cart page is the only place where we allow people to save cart and leave. So there was a save cart option, and we felt if you see there right at the bottom above those payment options, there's a small link save cart. And we've seen obviously people who save cart and come back, they have a much higher conversion rate. So we said, yes, few people will be frustrated, they'll leave. Few people, since they are on cart page, might opt to save cart, may come back later. This is a much better scenario than showing it on the payment page, making people get frustrated. There's no save cart option there. I'm pretty sure they're not going to come back, at least a vast majority of them. And that is exactly what happened in this test. A simple verbatim, we just added this information on the page. It gave us a multi-million-dollar uplift in US alone, and we implemented it globally. Interestingly, a few weeks back, we again tested this idea, again from an objective of reducing clutter on the page. We removed this information and saw what happens. Desktop people who were accessing our website from desktop, they were not impacted much. But for mobile users, we saw that moment we removed that information, we saw a drop in conversion. So it's interesting. I mean, that idea still holds. So it's very important to keep your ears open, have a clear channel or a clear methodology or approach to look at what people are leaving behind on your website. And sometimes, just digging into that gives you very simple winning ideas. Moving on to the next thing, which I think you also must have faced in your organizations. It's like everyone is so, obsessed with some of the leading websites, Amazon. I'll probably stick to US examples, Best Buy. And so there are, many instances where sales teams or the e-commerce teams come back and say that, this website has it, and I think we should also have it. And I'm just quoting a similar example from China this time. So I don't know how many of you are familiar, but there's a website called as JD.com in China, which is a very big e-commerce site. And most often from our business, we do get inputs on, what is great on JD.com and what we can probably bring in from there. So I'll come to the details of this example. But before that, this is one other principle that we need to keep in mind. Every website is unique, even if you're in the same category, even if you're selling probably the very same product. It's not necessary that the user profile or the personas that visit your website, the demographics of people who come to your website, it need not necessarily be very identical. There might be certain nuances, certain differences, and you should keep that in mind. Yes, there may be certain things you can adopt from competitive benchmarking and adopt those and probably test it out first. But just believing that just because an Amazon has it or a JD.com has it, therefore it is something that is great, is what I call as competitive benchmarking trap. So we have to be objective. Again, take some ideas, test it out, but don't be convinced that just because they have it, it'll work. So what we did here in China, there's this. This is basically an expanded version of our top navigation or the masthead. There's a lot of white space available there, and the idea was, and you must have seen this on multiple websites. Use that space for some sort of merchandising messaging. Either add a banner, add some deals there, and that's what we did. We just added something there, and the expectation was, this will lead to more people going to deals pages or pages that really matter in terms of conversion and would give us a conversion uplift. In reality, what we saw is not many people clicked on the banner itself, the merchandising content itself. So a big lesson learned, it may be great on another website, but doesn't necessarily mean that more people will use it on your website as well. Every website is unique. There are many elements on your website that others don't have, and just because a company is a leader or is the largest e-commerce site doesn't mean that everything that they are doing is good for you as well. So that's very important to keep in mind. It's even possible that something like this may not be even effective for some of those bigger sites, just that they probably haven't removed it or haven't figured out yet. So moving to the final principle that I would talk about is, if you're not neutral, unbiased, or objective about A/B testing, I think there's no point doing A/B testing at all. So this is all very uh, philosophical and more of a culture related thing. But in an organization where A/B testing really prospers or is really effective, or the experimentation strategy really works, is in an organization where, including the leadership, nobody is so obsessed with their ideas that they just want to see that to be proved as winner or great. You have to be neutral. So you should not lean towards your idea. So as I've mentioned there, you have to test whether it works or not. It's not trying to prove that this will definitely work. So now I'll give an example where we had a winner, or so-called winner, and something that did well, but we didn't go ahead and directly implement it. So this is on our website when someone searches for something. So if you can see in the search bar, someone has typed gaming laptops, and this is the search results page on the website. And there is an option to sort the search results, either based on relevance, based on price low to high, based on price high to low. So by default, the sorting is by relevance. The test idea was, and we had done some tests on some other product pages where we had seen that when we arrange it from low to high, we were seeing some good results, because probably logically people wanted to start from a lower price product, keep moving, and then figure out, okay, this is the max I'm going to pay, and then probably arrive at a product decision. Whatever it is, we saw that price from low to high was the best default arrangement on one of the product pages. We just tried to see, does that hold true for the search results page as well. So the hypothesis was, when we do it, when we sort from price low to high, we would see similar results. People would probably find it easier to go through the products that are listed there, and they'll be able to arrive at the one that really meets their expectation in terms of price point. So this was the test. The result was also good. This was a winning idea, as in it gave us a lift in conversion rate. So we just sorted, I mean, this doesn't exactly reflect how it looked, but we just changed the default option is low to high. So results were shown from lowest price product to highest price product. And it was working pretty well. We saw that the conversion rate went up. But working pretty well. We saw that the conversion rate went up. But working pretty well. We saw that the conversion rate went up. And when we were trying to dig deeper, what we figured out is, people who use the filter, obviously that helps. So you can narrow down based on certain criteria and have a limited number of products to choose from. So we were pushing a lot more people to now use these filters, which means what they were seeing by default after searching for something was not helping them as much. So I saw a increase in conversion rate, but it was mainly coming because now I was pushing more people to filter it, which was anyways enabling many of them to figure out what product they want using those filters. But the reality is, my starting hypothesis was I will make sure that whatever is listed in the search results page is so relevant that people go ahead and buy. So this is a winning idea, but this is not in line with my hypothesis. Yes, there is a conversion lift. People were using the filters, and that in effect led to a conversion. And when we were doing deep dive analysis on this, we realized what was happening. We saw that this result is for gaming, right? So Dell, I don't know how many of you know, is a marketplace for accessories and electronics as well. So we sell TVs, we sell monitors, and there we don't sell only Dell. We sell other brands as well, Samsung, LG, and others. So we saw that when people were searching for accessories, uh, and the default price was low to high, the algorithm, obviously our search algorithm needs to be a little more better, but if you put a certain term, it was showing things like cables pertaining to a specific product. It was showing, some very small meaningless product, locks or things like those low valued products, because obviously sorting is from low to high, but those accessories are linked, or those smaller things are related to a particular product. So for example, if there is a small pen drive which probably comes with a product, or I mean whatever it is, the lowest price thing was coming higher, which means you are searching for something specific, you see something totally irrelevant, you're forced to use the filter, and probably eventually got what you want. But was it good for user experience? No. So we took this learning and we kept iterating. So the only message here is, we should not be obsessed with our idea. I mean, whoever gave this idea, or whichever team came up with this idea, or whichever individual came up with this test hypothesis, could have gone ahead and said that, it works, and like, why are you trying to iterate further or test further? But the reality is we had done that with a specific objective in mind, and there is a gap in terms of what we saw. So obviously we know from a user experience, that's not the best experience, right? I mean, yes, people are using filter, but do you want them? We want to give them results without filtering, without putting that additional effort of filtering further. So that's why we didn't implement this. So very important to not like be so occupied or so inclined towards your own idea that you completely forget what you set out to do, and just do it anyways. So yeah, this is a quick summary of the things that I talked about, and yeah, I'll stop now, and happy to take questions. I'll lean on Vipul to let me know what questions are there.
Sure, Narayan, and let me first tell you that it was a really great presentation and it was very beautifully delivered as well. I'm sure the audience would agree. So thank you so much
Thank you.
for sharing that wisdom with the audience. Great. So I actually had a few things to highlight from the presentation, and one thing that, if I could squeeze out the entire presentation and get that most important job, I would say that the percentages, the conversion rates might be showing you a certain value. They might show you that, hey, implementing this change increased or improved your conversions by, let's say, 2 percentage points, 3 percentage points. But if you look at the holistic picture from a very, high altitude, you will see that people are actually achieving that goal via a completely different route.
Yeah,
So optimizations and experimentations, they need not, I mean, they do not need to focus on improving the conversion rate metrics, but they need to focus on the user experience, right?
absolutely, absolutely.
Right.
And
And
again, sorry, go ahead.
yep, please go ahead.
No, I was just saying, like, again, not being very short-sighted is very important. That's critical. Look at the larger
Right.
picture.
Yes, the larger picture is important because you mentioned, a case wherein people were, I think it was, I had noted it down, like people were coming to your cart page and then going to the review page, right? But
Yeah,
the conversion wins if you look at, let's say a business sets up is particularly testing the movement of people from the cart page to the review page, right?
right.
They will see an uplift in the number of people moving between these two pages. But if you look at the holistic picture, and you'll then see that, hey, people were actually bouncing back from the review page and going somewhere else, and
Yeah,
then they were completing a conversion through a completely different route at a completely different time, right? So you might not be really looking at the right metrics when you are, set out for optimization.
right.
Great. So I think we have a few questions now. We'll take them up one by one. Cool. So I think this can be picked up the first question, which is quite interesting as well. It's coming from Abhishek Kumar. So he's asking, what can we learn more about experiment? Where can we learn more about experimentation if we are coming from a completely different background?
Yeah, I think there are many forums. I mean, obviously BWO and many other vendors also offer a lot of resources in terms of how you do it. Again, it's the challenges. I mean, you can get all the specifics in terms of how to do it, but some of the subtle things is when you start doing it. But yeah, I mean, to your question, when you come from a different background and want to learn more about experimentation, I think websites like I don't know if I should be naming other vendors, but yeah, you could look at all the top vendors who provide A/B testing as an as an offering, or conversion experience optimization as an offering. I think you should find a lot. So yeah, I think it's
Right.
it's it's very well documented. I mean, pretty easily available online.
Right. And I
Sorry,
think
I'm
Google is the best. Google is your best
yeah.
friend, Abhishek, and Google it out. Do Of course, I'll be a bit biased towards my own business, toward my own company, and I'll say, yeah, go ahead and check out the VWO resources ASAP. But of course, feel free to Google whatever particular things that you want to learn, be it experimentation, be it about hypothesis or sample size, or split testing, A to A testing, anything. This entire ecosystem of conversion optimization is very, very vast. And as Narayan also mentioned, so many good points in his presentation. There are lots and lots of things to look at, not just from a logistical point of view or an operational point of view, but also from an emotional, a psychological point of view as well. So you need to be updated on all those fronts as well. Great. The second question is from Nikita. Nikita is asking, test KPIs aside, what methods do you suggest using to measure the impact of A/B test on user experience?
Okay, this is test results obviously still become a very important measurement factor. The question is, what do you define as user experience metrics? And that's a gray area. Again, every organization would have an end goal. I'm talking more from a Dell.com perspective, where we are so focused on improving the conversion rate. So everything that we do is like, we want to make sure that people end up buying more. But broadly speaking, that may not be the case always. Sometimes it's not about making sure people buy more and buy in the very same session or visit. You could probably still give a good experience, and especially probably people who are still not very convinced about buying and then come back later and buy. So how do you define those metrics is a very tricky thing. Obviously, other than the hard metrics or conversion metrics, we also look at exit rate as a key indicator, especially in an e-commerce setup, right? If people are not moving forward, then something is going wrong. We do look at how many people move backward in our so-called logical funnel. I mean, obviously we have top of the funnel pages, mid funnel, and checkout. But so logically, if we see that someone has reached a product details page, but then probably goes back to the home page, or probably goes back to a category page, which is in our logical funnel is a backward movement. I think that's again a fair indicator. But it is something that you have to figure out later as an organization. These are good indicators: exit rate, bounce rate probably not always relevant, especially for pages where not a lot of people are not starting their journey on. But exit rate and people moving backward, these are two very good indicators. And probably the other indicator of user experience on a page is how people are engaging with the key elements on the page. If you are intending them to move forward using some of those elements, and barely anyone is clicking on them, that again shows something that people are not really finding whatever you are offering is engaging. So yeah, I think exit rate, backward movement, these are things that we look at, but it's very tricky. Time spent, frankly, personally, I don't believe in time spent as an indicator of whether it's good or bad. Checkout, yes, probably lower time spent is good, but whenever someone is browsing, trying to figure out a product, I can't really necessarily say that, people spending more time on a product details page or a category page is bad. It is quite possible that some people want to consume more information. Doesn't necessarily mean that they have had a bad experience. So other than the common examples of blogs and websites with a lot of articles where time spent indicates engagement, I think in an e-commerce setup I'm very skeptical about using time spent as an indicator of user experience. So yeah, I mean, exit rate, backward movement, probably engagement with the key elements on the page, these are what we go with.
Sure. Thanks, Narayan. I think, Nikita, I hope you got the answer. Okay, let me look at a new question that just arrived. Okay, so Diksha is asking, even though the winning idea didn't corroborate with the hypothesis, is molding that user behavior to your advantage a bad idea?
No, it is not. I mean, that's again how the organization wants to look at it. So, what did we set out to do in that particular example is we wanted to make life simpler for users. We made life difficult for users, because they were not getting what they wanted. They had to take that extra effort. So, for us, yes, it is good, but why we are not implementing it is we probably are convinced that there is a better way of doing it. So for someone who doesn't have the appetite or probably again the resources to do so many iterations or figure things out, you could still take a call and say it did well, I'm going ahead and implementing. But somewhere in your mind, do remember that people who are coming to your website probably are still having to do that one additional step. It is working for you, but do you really want that is the question. So yes, there's nothing wrong in going ahead and implementing because it is a proven winner. If you see a lift with statistical significance, I think you should be more than happy to do it. But again, for us, we really go by making life simpler for the user. And if we, based on deep dive, see that this is not, this is something else contributing to it, then we want to understand it better, and that's why we iterate. But it's not a bad idea as such. I mean, if the business really doesn't have the bandwidth and room, they can go ahead and implement.
Sure. I hope that answers your question, Diksha. Guys, we are we have crossed the 60 minutes mark, and I believe Narayan must be exhausted because he just came, he rushed from a meeting just to do this webinar for you guys. So if you have any more questions, of course, feel free to connect with Narayan on LinkedIn, and of course, do check out his digital analytics community. Uh, and become a part of it. I'm sure you'll get to learn a lot from that community by networking with other like-minded people. So feel free to do that, right? So Narayan, if you could quickly move on to the last slide, I just had a little information to share with our audience. Right. So, guys, yep, another amazing and interesting interview is coming up with Karan Perry, who leads the who is the senior product lead at Amazon Prime Video. Of course, everyone knows it, and of course, in times of COVID, everyone must be using Amazon Prime Video. Although Karan Perry won't be revealing any new series that Prime Video must be coming up with, but of course, he'll have a lot to share in terms of how Amazon approaches experimentation, and Amazon being, of course, the most trusted place where experimentation sits at a very I don't know how to describe it, but everybody, whenever anyone talks about experimentation, the example of Amazon always comes to the front. Right, so do register for this upcoming session with Karan Perry. That the date and time are available in front of you. You can quickly take a screenshot of this slide and register yourselves there. So yeah, with that, guys, thank you so much for attending this webinar today, and thank you so much to you, Narayan, for sharing so much learning with our audience.
Thank you, Vipul. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Great. So thanks, guys, and stay safe and keep washing your hands regularly. Bye bye.
Bye.